The Wars of the Roses, 3 decades of rebellion, treason and dynastic warfare. Between 1455 and 1487, the royal houses of York and Lancaster were locked in a vicious struggle for the English crown. And it came to a head right here. This is Bosworth, where the decisive battle of the Wars of the Roses took place. It was a turning point in English history, the end of the Middle Ages and the savage beginnings of an England we still recognise today. For the last 5 years, a team of archaeologists have been combing over this blood-stained ground. What they're now beginning to find is changing our entire understanding of this most iconic of British battles. This 15th century cannonball is some of the earliest evidence of gunfire ever found on an English battlefield.
3, 2, 1, firing! Oh, got it!
My God, what on earth has happened to it? It's all misshapen.
Analysis of these finds using the latest scientific techniques, along with experimental archaeology, tells us how early cannon developed. All this new evidence is pointing towards a radical idea. Could it be that the Bosworth battlefield is in a completely different place to where previously thought? These finds are physical evidence of where the battle actually happened, and they do what no historical document can do. They take us to the very front line of medieval warfare.
Have you got a headache? You're all right. It's just a flash wound. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Every year in late August, enthusiasts flock to a field in rural Leicestershire. They're here to witness the reenactment of the Battle of Bosworth, thought to have taken place on this very spot over 500 years ago. The location is Ambion Hill, where the incumbent king, Richard III, is said to have drawn up his army for battle. His opponent, one Henry Tudor, was the rank outsider. The outcome of this battle would effectively end the Wars of the Roses and change the course of British history. As the crowds of spectators show, its importance is remembered to this day. Among the visitors is historical novelist Philippa Gregory.
What I think is genuinely extraordinary about it is that the reenactors come here in absolute seriousness with a complete commitment to being authentic.
At Oxford! At Oxford!
At the very heart of it, this is where one of the most significant parts of English history starts. This is the Battle of Bosworth. It couldn't be more important. If you're interested in England, this is where it is.
So what exactly happened at Bosworth and where? I thought all of this was firmly written into the history books beyond dispute. But then I met battlefield archaeologist Glenn Ford. So, is this where Richard stood on that fateful day, looking at Henry's forces massing below him?
No, afraid not.
No?
No. But last couple of 100 years, this is where people thought the battle was fought, but actually not.
I did. As far as I'm concerned, this is Bosworth Field. I've been here loads of times.
What we now know as a result of all the work we've done is the battle was fought about 2 miles away, down there in that flat ground off in the distance.
It's a bit of an anticlimax for me, but let's go and have a look at it, shall we? For the past 5 years, Glenn has been obsessively scouring the area around Ambion Hill and further afield. He now thinks he's found the true location of the Battle of Bosworth, 2 miles southwest of where previously thought.
There's a turning in here.
But will he be able to convince Time Team's experts that he's right? Of course, the million-dollar question is, how come you're so sure that this is Bosworth Field?
It might not look much, but that's the proof. That small lead sphere can only have been fired from an artillery piece, and there's no other reason for artillery to be in this landscape than the battle.
And you found it where?
Just here in this field.
And then once you'd found that, presumably that meant a whole new strategy would have to kick off.
Exactly. We started off from this point and we worked our way around. And what we ended up is this distribution plan. We're standing just here. There's the first round shot. And across that landscape behind you, we found this whole scatter of round shot. 32 scattered across that whole area, off for about a mile. That's the battlefield.
32 cannonball shot is a record number for any medieval battlefield. And crucially, what it almost certainly means is that Bosworth was a new kind of battle. A form of warfare that placed gunpowder weapons in the thick of the action. It's highly significant because traditionally we think of medieval battles as dominated by archers, swordsmen and above all, mounted knights. Here at the Wallace Collection in London, you get a real sense of what imposing figures these warriors would have cut on the battlefield. In a way, it was like being a bit of a superhero.
Exactly like a superhero. These people are medieval superheroes, not just symbolically, literally. A superhero is someone who can do physical things that ordinary people can't do. And that's what knights were. They could survive terrible physical punishment that would kill anyone else. They could fight better than anyone else. They could do things with their bodies physically that ordinary people weren't trained to do. And of course, they had these tremendously powerful beasts.
This armour is absolutely stunning. Can we date it?
Yes, we can be very certain that it was made in southern Germany between about 1485 and 1490.
So from our point of view, it's bang on the money. This is the War of the Roses.
Yes, absolutely bang on the money.
So there would have been an element of the status symbol about this?
Absolutely. It's one giant status symbol. It's a statement of divine right. This is how we imagine divine power. St. George, St. Michael, the armies of heaven pouring down out of the sky to destroy the armies of Lucifer.
There's no question that knights would still have played a critical role at Bosworth, but just how important were cannon becoming by this date? We'll use experimental archaeology to understand the emergence of gunpowder weapons and their role in the Battle of Bosworth. We'll also examine key finds from the site, even if they are few and far between. Tony, you and I have worked on lots of First and Second World War battle sites, and in every one, shed loads of stuff has come up as soon as you put the spade in. But here, there's virtually nothing.
Yeah, this is a real challenge. This is battlefield archaeology, British style. You're looking at battlefields that are hundreds of years old. The material is scattered over a very wide area, and here, the real challenge in the first place was finding the battlefield at all.
So where have all the potential finds gone?
Well, that's an interesting story, and that process of removal of objects happens almost as soon as the battle is over, because all of this stuff can be recycled. Arrows can be picked from the ground, obviously shot again, reused. Armour is stripped from bodies. Everything has a value, and in fact, medieval warfare is pretty environmentally friendly because you can recycle almost everything. And what they're leaving behind are just the very small bits that they're not seeing, and that's what's left behind for us as archaeologists.
The small bits left behind by battlefield scavengers just don't amount to much. So does Glenn really have enough evidence to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this is the actual battlefield location? And will he ever truly be able to piece together the story of how cannon were used here? If today's finds are anything to go by, he's still a long way off.
What have you got?
Wow.
It's a good weight.
It is. First, when it came out of the ground, we thought crotal bow, but it's far too heavy.
It's solid, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they do
And
get
it's
full of soil, but that's just solid.
And it's iron.
What is that? What's that bit? Have you any idea?
What do you reckon that is?
Oh, you've come in just at the right moment.
Yeah.
The thing about metal detecting is, and these big surveys, there's a really frustrating amount of stuff that you don't have a clue what it is. You know, there's bits of junk from tractors, and Lord knows what gets dumped on these fields. And that's definitely within that class of I haven't a clue.
Yep.
So, not the greatest day so far, is it?
It's a pretty typical Bosworth day. It really is.
I'm loving it. I'm coming here for my holidays.
Now, you try that one. I don't know what that is. It might might not be significant.
Oh, that's pretty. Well, it's a rose, isn't it? It's a shame it's not coloured. We can tell which side it's from. That's got the feel of the period. It's
Yeah, that's the thing that makes me feel it's early. is the
roughly
back.
cast. I mean, that could be a piece of horse furniture, you know, from the harness of a horse.
There you are. The War of the Roses. Tangible evidence. Possibly.
It's about as good as it's going to get, isn't it?
Archaeologically, these are relatively meagre pickings, but the team aren't giving up just yet. What would you really like to find here?
I think, along with Glenn, what I would really like to see coming up are arrowheads, because that will tell us a lot more about the specific detail of the action from the Battle of Bosworth. If we look at sites like Toutton, they've managed there over 15 years or so to come up with an incredibly detailed picture of what's happening in that battle, and arrowheads have told quite a lot of that story.
Toutton is another Wars of the Roses battlefield site, but one that's already proved rich in archaeological finds. Here they've got direct evidence from the brutal, hellish world of late medieval warfare. Hundreds of arrowheads and scores of mutilated bodies. They paint a picture of savage conflict during the Wars of the Roses.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen. Join over 10,000 Patreon members worldwide and see new digs take place and amazing additional extras.
At the Battle of Bosworth reenactment, the participants get hands-on experience with medieval weapons. In the era before gunpowder took over, warfare was largely about hand-to-hand combat, and the Bosworth reenactors gain a real insight into this extraordinarily violent world.
A lot of the injuries predominantly was from the sternum to the face area, because once you're in a clash on those battle lines, you find yourself tightly packed like this. You can only move with the crowd. I mean, there's probably dead bodies at either side of you with 7 or 8 arrows in them, but they can't fall to the ground because you're so tightly packed. So in that, you may only have a 2-inch space where you're just trying to thrust into the enemy's eyeballs or the throat area or the sternum if you can.
The reality of medieval warfare was a long way from the romantic chivalric ideal. In the Wars of the Roses, the violence reached its darkest hour with the merciless battle that brought Richard III's brother Edward to the throne. In 1461, Edward, the young Duke of York, proclaimed himself King Edward IV in place of Henry VI. On March the 29th, the two kings clashed at Toutton, near York. Edward IV won, but in the most bloody battle ever fought on English soil, 30,000 men were killed. Unlike Bosworth, at Toutton there's no longer any doubt about the battlefield's location. The evidence is simply overwhelming. Here they've set the archaeological standard for Wars of the Roses battlefields. A standard that Glenn will have to match if he's to prove the new Bosworth battlefield location. Phil Harding's visiting York University to see what some of the Toutton finds can tell us about the nature of warfare over a decade before Bosworth.
So here we've actually got 3 skeletons of people who all died at Toutton. Can we actually tell anything from the bones about how these people died?
Well, this individual's a classic, really, because we can see exactly how this chap died. And what we've got is it got at least 2 sword blows, 1, 2, across the back of the skull, but also, interestingly enough, we've got at least 2 stab wounds. There's one there and there's one on the side.
How were they actually sustained then?
Well, I can demonstrate that quite well if we use this replica sword here. Exhibit this. So basically, if you imagine this, the classic sword blow, if you do this, which is a slashing motion, but also with a sword, if you've got a gauntlet in your hand and you're not afraid of cutting your hands. So the other thing that they used to do in battle was that.
Right.
And so what happens is if they do that, they can immediately follow through with that.
So in this particular case here, we've got one slash coming down like that across the back of the skull,
yes,
and then finishing it off with a stab into the back like that.
Yeah. This chap here He received a sword cut to the front of the face. Basically, a sword has come down there, just missed the front of his nose and chopped into his top teeth and his upper lip. He cut through all of the roots of the teeth, and when we excavated him, all the teeth were anatomically in the correct location. So we know that the flesh was holding basically his face together, even though it was fragmented.
I mean, that must have been a hell of a blow. I mean, his face immediately after that would have been a bloody mass. I mean, it would have been awful. Was that enough to kill him?
That blow alone wouldn't have killed him. It might have concussed him or put him off guard. But one thing we can see is that there's another blow where a stabbing wound has gone straight through the skull to the side of the head.
So we've got somebody literally administering the coup de grace going like that into the side of the skull.
Side of the skull.
There are further signs of vicious close-quarters combat on Tim's third skeleton.
There is evidence of trauma to the upper part of the foot from a stab wound. Somebody obviously attacked him with a sword and they've gone stab into the top of the foot, completely incapacitated him, obviously left him with a bloody wound in one foot, and then, of course, they've finished him off.
That would certainly have slowed him up.
It certainly would have, yeah.
But what we mustn't lose sight of is that these are three human beings that died a terrible death on a medieval battlefield.
The Toutton skeletons reveal that most of the men fighting here were killed by swords or arrows. It's just what you'd expect. At this stage in the Wars of the Roses, we'd anticipate finding very few gunpowder weapons on the battlefield. But there's one other innocent-looking find from Toutton that Tim's keen to show to Phil.
Even though it's 1461 and it's 20-odd years before the Battle of Bosworth, we have evidence of what appears to be artillery. We've got this fragment of bronze or copper alloy, and the outside is significantly different to the inside. If you look down it, you can see it looks like a tube. And of course, if you analyse the residue, you get evidence of sulphur. Now, that's one of the constituent parts of gunpowder. So this is one of the early examples where there's evidence, physical evidence of firearms on a medieval battlefield.
It's a hugely significant find that may help to change our understanding of late medieval warfare. This handgun is an early indication of the gunpowder revolution that would soon sweep over Europe.
Fire! Have a care!
The question that we're getting closer to answering is just how advanced was this revolution by the 1480s and the Battle of Bosworth. Part of that answer may lie in establishing just what was involved in cannon manufacture. I'd always thought this would be a daunting, complex process, but there's only one way to find out. Make one for yourself. So we're sending Phil to a Yorkshire blacksmith's to have a go at reproducing an early cannon. The first step is to shape the wrought iron staves that will form the gun barrel.
Well, I reckon that's a really nice stave. I mean, is that ready to go in a gun now?
Almost. We need to just turn over that end and shape it.
Yeah, how's that?
Nearly done. Just a bit more on the edge here.
Even more on the
edge?
Yeah. Is that any better?
It is better, but it still needs to be a bit more.
God, you're a hard taskmaster, aren't you? Right, is that looking better?
That's better.
I mean, you can really see that it really is almost getting to a right angle.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, quite proud of that.
The stave is curved in this way to form the face of the muzzle. The next stage is to make the iron hoops that will hold the staves together. It takes great skill to bend the red-hot iron into a neat ring and then to weld it closed. It's a little beyond Phil's entry-level smithing skills, so he leaves this task to expert iron worker Harrick.
Ready.
Finished?
Yeah.
Pleased with it?
Yes.
So, where's the weld?
I think it's just a little mark there.
So good you can hardly see it. That is an incredible piece of work.
The separate staves are then temporarily held together around a wooden cylinder, though they wouldn't have had power tools 500 years ago.
OK, that's got all those in.
Then the iron rings are returned to the fire. Heating them makes them expand so they'll fit over the staves. When they cool down, they'll retract, creating a powerful grip.
Really is looking like a gun barrel now, isn't it? There he is. That is quite incredible. The complexity of it, I'd never sort of imagined, and yet it's so simple. But that beauty of it just being held together, just totally literally by the skill of the craftsman, is just incredible.
A very satisfying object, isn't it?
And that's the end that you really wouldn't want to see pointing at you. It really is superb. I know it's looking like down the barrel. The tightness of those staves is quite remarkable. I mean, it is a perfect column. Beautiful.
Given that Phil, with a little bit of help, can turn out a cannon in one afternoon, the manufacturing process would seem to be surprisingly straightforward.
Every village blacksmith had the technical ability to handle this material and, in theory, to do what was necessary to make a gun.
So does that mean to say that somebody would commission the local blacksmith? Can you knock me up a cannon?
I suppose if you needed a shipload of cannons in short order, you'd just ring round the local smiths, wouldn't you?
So we've discovered that for any medieval blacksmith capable of making cartwheels, a basic cannon wouldn't have been a great stretch. But we've not found any historical evidence to show increasing numbers of gunpowder weapons making their way to the battlefield. I've got a good idea where to look, though. Britain's most infamous fortress. The role of the Tower of London as a medieval palace and fearsome prison is well known. But it was also a top security arms depot, a massive arsenal for the storing, testing and distribution of the king's stockpile of weapons. I'm going to look for possible clues within the tower's archives. How important were guns and cannons to life at the tower?
Very important. We can see that just by having a look at this 1597 engraving, that by this stage ordnance is being stored in the north of the complex. It's very likely that it was also being stored here in the 15th century as well.
So you've got all this activity going on along here, but I love these. These are piles of cannonballs, presumably.
Piles of cannonballs there, which again indicate the quantities that are being stored on site are considerable. But we've also got some inventories that allow us to see this kind of detail. So we've got, for example, an inventory that dates from 1405.
And much more detail. I can see guns, which presumably is guns, without chambers, guns with forelocks, guns with some other sort of forelocks, guns, gun chambers.
What this really shows is just how far things have developed. I mean, you referred to guns, but you've got different types of guns as well.
So who were the guys who were organising this stuff? Who were the visionaries who recognised that warfare was changing and that this was required?
Well, I think, you know, the spur to this kind of change comes from the crown, from the monarchs themselves.
Records from the tower appear to show that guns of all types would have been becoming more numerous as the Wars of the Roses went on. Glenn's now keen to take a closer look at some actual cannon from the period. But there's a problem. Almost no British examples survive from the 1480s. So Glenn, along with ancient weapons expert Steve Walton, is travelling to a small museum in the Swiss town of La Neuveville. It's close to the site of a 15th century battle, where a massive horde of hundreds of guns were captured from the Duke of Burgundy. Incredibly, much of the collection remains intact to this day. Glenn's hoping their construction may hold the key to identifying the types of cannon used at Bosworth.
Give me extra light.
That's now we can see it.
Look at that. Doesn't that look sort of like petrified canvas bag?
I think it's metal.
It's got a little give to it.
Is it? OK, perhaps it's fabric then.
He's looking for small irregularities in the barrel, anything that could mark a cannonball as it's fired.
Each of the long, flat pieces of iron that make up the inner face of the gun, the bore of the gun, haven't been fully rounded by the smith. So you got flat surfaces and very slight angles. And what that means is, as the gun fires, the ball expands, because it's made of lead, and takes up the shape of the barrel. you'll see the individual staves are likely to create a signature on the ball.
So can Glenn reproduce the markings found on the Bosworth balls? If he can, he should be able to match them up with a specific type of cannon. But to do that, he needs a test firing.
3, 2, 1, fire!
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
For God, England and Lancaster!
On the fields of Bosworth, the hour of reckoning was fast approaching for Richard III and Henry Tudor. The two men were rivals for the English throne, and by the end of the day's battle, there could only be one victor. 22nd of August, 1485. We're standing up here. What are we looking at?
We're looking at fundamentally three armies. You've got Richard III's army, the army of the ordained Crown King of England, lined up battle ready. You've got Henry Tudor's army, a bit of a ragtag army, and you've got the very well-organised, well-disciplined army of the Stanley brothers, who have promised that they will support both Henry and Richard, and are fundamentally standing completely still, watching what's going on, possibly even at this late moment, making their minds up which side they're going to join.
How did it start?
They kind of line up and get ready. Then there's usually a volley of shots, generally archery, but probably here cannon, possibly handgun as well. And then the infantry close on each other, and it's more like a brawl than a battle. There's a lot of hacking and slicing and stabbing and pushing about.
Richard, the experienced commander with vastly superior forces, seemed very much the man of the hour. But medieval battles weren't always won or lost on the strength of numbers alone. Would Richard's powerful cannon allow him to dominate? It's a story that's still being pieced together by battlefield archaeologist Glenn Ford. He's found a record number of cannon shot at Bosworth. The next stage in his investigation involves visiting the PSI labs in Switzerland. Here they operate a very special scanner, one of very few machines in Europe that can see through solid lead. The technology is known as neutron tomography. If it allows Glenn to see inside his lead cannonballs, he'll know exactly what type of shot to use for his test firings.
None of them are perfectly spherical, so that's going to cause a few problems.
Yeah, so this one's quite distorted.
Yeah.
The cannonballs are loaded into a sealed chamber. Here they're bombarded with radiation to prepare them for the neutron scanning process. It's a little like a reverse X-ray. The beam sees through metals, but it's stopped by water and even by gases, like hydrogen. They've begun by scanning the outside surface of the balls.
Yeah, that groove there must be that. It's got a... Yes, and there's that flat surface.
So where it's white on the screen, that will be the iron oxide.
That's what we're seeing
so you can see
around
that on the
there,
surface,
where the point of the dice is just coming out of the lead.
This iron oxide, or rust, on the surface of the ball shows there's likely to be an iron lump within this particular cannon shot. Archaeologists have long been intrigued by these cores found within lead cannonballs. They're often made of other metals or even stone, and nobody's really sure why they were made this way. Glenn needs a precise image of the core, but will the scan deliver?
So this is the moment of truth. We'll see inside it. Wow. So well, that's the first time I've really seen what one of these cubes looks like in great detail.
There's a lot of other material here. All of these rough bits, that's corrosion.
So maybe, is that one of these little humps?
Yeah, so that's the bit protruding from the bottom.
So turning it round, and there it goes, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the cube inside there isn't a cube at all, really. It's very distorted.
More scans are needed. But Glenn's already developing theories about why the metal and stone cubes are there.
The most obvious explanation you can come up with, I think, is it saves lead. I have my doubts about that. When you're investing so much money in high technology artillery pieces, when you're bringing a whole artillery train with you with all the logistical costs, the cost of a piece of lead is minimal. Has it got certain ballistic properties? Is it, for example, reducing the weight?
He now knows what's inside the Bosworth cannonballs, so he can reproduce the effects of firing and match the balls to the guns that launch them. To this end, he's borrowed a replica 15th century cannon and has got permission for a test firing. But before he can light the blue touch paper, Glenn needs one more vital ingredient: freshly forged, authentic cannonballs. They're not the kind of thing you can simply buy off the shelf, so Glenn's planning to cast his own. He's based his cannonball design on the data from the neutron tomography lab, and he's using it to replicate the various types and shot sizes found at Bosworth. With cannonballs at the ready, Glenn's now set for the big day. 6 a.m. An unmarked truck arrives on open farmland near Bosworth. It's carrying gunpowder, shot, and some very large guns. It's the morning of the test firing, the climax to the long process of experimental archaeology.
The experiments we're doing today are breaking new ground. The work that's been done before has almost all been on 17th, 18th century warfare. What we now want to do is push the boundaries back in time to understand the origins of firepower.
First up is a modern test weapon, which will help establish the correct charge for the type of powder being used today. Derek Alsop, from the Defence Academy's Cranfield campus, is calculating the potential range of the guns.
On this sort of ground, I expect them to go at least 800 metres. The first impact should be about 100 metres, and then it may bounce up to 8 times and then roll at the end of that.
Glenn's assembled a whole team of archaeologists, ballistics experts and photographers. He's even rounded up a posse of volunteers whose job it is to retrieve the spent cannonballs. Making up the numbers is Phil Harding.
All call signs, all call signs. Range is clear, over.
Firing. 3, 2, 1, fire.
Right, look, there it goes. God, 2,
3,
4, 5,
6,
yeah.
Possibly 6.
It's like those ducks and drakes when you've
That's
done
it.
it with a stone,
That's
isn't it?
exactly what it's like,
They
yeah.
do, really. They bounce across.
You two ought to be further apart, really.
But firing the cannonballs is the easy part. Finding them is a whole other ball game.
Jenny, do you think we're in about the right place for the third bounce over?
Yes, we think there should be a bounce just between you and the next yellow markers, yes.
Found it! 1 ball!
Once located, Glenn records all the valuable data. Derek then repeats the firing process with different charges and barrel types, working his way through the full range of cannonballs.
Quite an incredible piece of research that's going on here, in my opinion. I mean, it looks like a load of kids playing with big guns, and it's, you know, I guess it is pretty fun, but at the end of the day, it's a serious piece of research. With all this data, with all this recording that they're picking up, I mean, they will be able to actually build up patterns of where shot was landing. They'll be able to compare that directly with the information they've been getting at Bosworth. Let's be honest, Bosworth is one of the crucial battles of English history.
With the powder tests complete, it's time for the main event. A test firing using the full-scale replica 15th century cannon. Cannons like this may have been used at Bosworth, but only the test firing can help confirm it. Late afternoon, rural Leicestershire. A small team of experts are preparing to fire a replica 15th century cannon. It's the culmination of months of hard work for archaeologists studying the Battle of Bosworth. Phil Harding has been appointed ball boy for the afternoon.
First bounce there and then track it down, and we want to pick up the position where it stops.
I'll do my best. I'm a beginner at this. just bizarre, isn't it, really? You kind of find yourself being an artillery spotter. My dad probably did this when he was in the army, and my grandfather before him.
Stand by to fire. Stand by to fire.
Firing now!
Firing.
There he goes. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. OK, we got it. Let's go for it.
Down there. You said it was going to go a long way, you know.
And it certainly did. And that was only a 150 gram. Nobody really believed it was going to go this far.
As long as we get the little devil. Here it is.
Well done.
Wow, look at that. My God, what on earth has happened to it? It's all misshapen.
That's exactly what we were hoping for.
But what has happened to it?
OK, now, if you look at that, you can see the original surface of the ball.
Yeah.
On there. Look at that. You can see there's a flat band around it.
Yeah.
It's taken up the shape of the barrel. And that's almost perfectly flat. Just what you'd expect to happen if the base of the ball has been compressed, and look at how it's been compressed by that wooden tampion.
The wooden tampion or plug from the powder flask bursts out as the powder ignites. It slams into the cannonball, causing this flattening effect. This is what leaves the unique marks on the ball.
It's given you a signature we can read that tells us about the gun that fired it and how it was loaded.
Glenn can now compare the signatures on his original 15th century Bosworth cannonballs with the signatures from the test firings.
3, 2, 1, firing!
Eventually, this data will tell him which types of guns were operating at Bosworth and reveal more about the impact they could have had on the battle. Debate has long raged over how effective early cannon really were. They may have been most effective as terror weapons, their fearsome roar unsettling men and horses. But given their reasonable accuracy over limited distances, they could also have been aimed at dense formations of troops. And today, the team have a unique opportunity to fire a cannon from short range straight into a human torso.
So what is this?
The reason we need to do it is because we want to be able to see how much energy that takes out of the cannonball, whether it drops short or whatever it does.
How are you simulating the human body?
Well, what we've got is gelatine. That simulates the soft tissue. We're using simulated bones, and that simulates the long bones. It's actually a composite, such as bone is composite. And what you've got is that you've got an outer and an inner fairly solid material, and the inner is actually a spongy material, as bone is.
Right.
So it actually has very similar properties. It fragments in a similar manner.
The other thing is, can you guarantee you're going to hit the target?
No.
But that's why you've got it virtually at point blank range.
What we've done is we've actually reduced the charge so that it would have the same velocity as if it was 100 metres away.
Is my hat going to be safe?
No. I'll take your hat with you.
I think I ought to have it back there. Clear out of the way.
3, 2, 1, firing!
Oh, got it! Got it! Knocked it right off the perch, blew it right over.
It went high. We got him through the neck.
Did go straight through, look.
Yeah.
We've got bone fragments too.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, because that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to hit a bone to make sure that we had that pattern on the ball.
To me, the biggest thing about this is the personal thing. You imagine standing in a battle line and the bloke next door to you being hit like that.
Yeah.
I tell you what, that'd shake you up a bit. The flesh and bone being sprayed around everywhere.
Yeah.
It would have a very, very demoralising effect on any troops in that battle line, I'm sure of it.
What you've got to remember is that soldiers behind this will also be in just as much danger. It will go through several soldiers and actually do as much damage to them as well.
Well, from what I could see, I mean, the actual extent of the cannonball has gone virtually as far as any of the others.
Exactly. You'll be surprised just how little energy it actually takes out.
the cannonball leaves the gun barrel at approximately 650 miles per hour. So if you want to study its ballistic properties, you need special equipment. Today's test firing is being captured by an ultra-high-speed camera.
Okay, so the first ball of flame will come out now. Now, the ball is not in front of this. There's no ball in front of here. If I play it on further, you'll see this second ball of flame coming out, and the actual projectile, the ball, is in front of this one.
So it's in this gap between these two pieces of smoke?
That's right, yes. And then we play it further forward, and you'll see the ball emerging from the flame.
There it comes, yep.
Coming out and going down range. Because we know the frame rate of the camera, we can actually measure the time it takes from the actual match going off. We actually know how long it takes for the main charge to build up pressure, push that bung out the front, and then the actual time it takes from the projectile to come down the bore. It's all about the timings of what's going on.
They'll need months of further analysis in the lab to draw their final conclusions, but it's been a fantastic day's work. Glenn's optimistic that the data they've gathered will eventually give him a much clearer picture of the artillery mustered at Bosworth. We can't yet know how Richard's guns were used at Bosworth, but as the battle neared its peak, he still seemed to have the advantage. But then came an unexpected opportunity. Henry and his bodyguard troops were in grave danger. They'd become separated from the main body of their army. Richard saw his chance.
And Richard III does the last chivalric charge in English history and suddenly takes the opportunity, thinks he's going to end it in one act and that it will be his act and really hand-to-hand single combat. And he charges down the field, almost leaving his bodyguard behind him. He goes so fast, right into Henry Tudor's bodyguard, who fall back before him.
The fighting was ferocious. But Richard's cavalry had unwittingly charged into boggy ground, and their attack was losing momentum. Then the battle turned. The Stanley brothers, with their army, until now hedging their bets on the sidelines, decided which man to back.
And Thomas Stanley scorched down this field in this massive, massive, massive cavalry charge and just sweep everything out of their way, cut down Richard's horse. He's down on his feet fighting. Then they cut down Richard.
The king has gone down. The king, Richard III, is dead. The king now lies a miserable corpse upon the field of Bosworth.
According to legend, later that day, Henry was crowned King Henry VII right there on the battlefield. Lord Stanley placed the crown upon his head. A new golden age of British history had just dawned. And for Glenn Ford, there's been one last pivotal find, a tiny insignia badge of a boar, Richard's personal symbol. It may look insignificant, but it might just help Glenn identify the very fen or area of marshy ground where Richard met his fate. I know this is only a reproduction because the original has had to go to the British Museum for valuation, hasn't it? But it is a beautiful little thing.
One of only two in the country, silver gilt, and that's the significant thing because it would only have been worn by somebody of knightly or higher status.
And your archaeologists were very excited about the fact that it was found here. What's that all about?
We know from the documents that Richard died when his horse became mired in a marsh.
Yeah, and where?
We're just here. You can see the Roman road here, and then we've got fen names all the way across along the side of this stream.
So it would have been boggy and marshy right here?
Yeah, absolutely. And you see just in here, that dip on the other side of the stream.
Yeah.
We've had peat deposits from there, and we've got C14 dates that take us back into the medieval period.
So it could have been exactly round here that Richard III died.
If someone had said to me, what do you want to find, what object would you like to find on this battlefield, and where would you like to find it, I would have said, that boar, just here.
Makes the hairs on the back of your spine tingle, doesn't it? Glenn may now be able to start rewriting the Bosworth history books. He's convinced that his test firing data, together with significant archaeological finds, provides solid proof of the new battlefield location. But does he have enough evidence to persuade expert battlefield archaeologist Tony Pollard? They're beginning by examining the map of cannonball finds from Glenn's proposed new Bosworth site. Does there have to be a logic to this dispersal pattern? Couldn't it be just a load of cannonballs fired by both sides that have arbitrarily met in the middle?
There seems to be a concentration of round shot there and another concentration there, and when you get a concentration like that in the distribution pattern, there's generally some explanation behind that.
Do you think it's possible that you've got outgoing cannon fire from here and from here, that you may have the army in between, so you've got the guns on the flanks? Does that make sense?
Well, if you look at the first results from the experimental firing, the gun here and a scatter of round shot going a long way down range.
Why are you getting a shot landing so close to the gun when you've got this stuff right the way down the range? Why is there that variance?
Well, here you've got a gun that was elevated, so that gets a much greater range, about 900 metres. Here you've got a different gun firing to that one. Different guns, different ranges.
All right, if you're right, and it was an army firing in this direction, which army would it have been?
If that's what the pattern means, and it's a big if, then I think Richard's army is sitting there. That's the army that we think has the largest number of guns. We could be looking at the great artillery fire going out at the very beginning of the battle.
All right, I suppose this is the biggest question of all. How do we actually know that we're on Bosworth Field? Couldn't this have been guns which have fired from elsewhere and just landed up here?
The experiments show that the guns couldn't have been sitting out here. They just don't have the range to get into this area. But the other thing is, it's not just round shot we're dealing with. We might not have the same scale of finds that you get at Toutton, but if you look, each of the blue symbols here is one of our round shot. They're not on their own. Look at this collection of other artefacts together with this scatter of round shot. And they're not just any old finds. This is a high-status sword guard that's been broken, almost certainly broken in action by someone fighting just there. The badge, the boar badge, and that came from the other end of that scatter. It's not a coincidental pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, are you now happy that this is Bosworth Field?
I've approached this with a huge degree of caution, which Glenn obviously has as well, and until he showed us the overlap between the cannon shot and the rest of the finds, I wasn't too certain. But I think when you balance it with the rest of what is clearly a battle debris field, I think you're on the money. You've clearly got to do more definition.
Yeah.
But you found the Battle of Bosworth.
It wasn't because of cannon that Richard III lost the Battle of Bosworth, but he may have lost because he was stuck in the past, fighting an older type of battle. Medieval monarchs had to put themselves in the front line, prove their mettle on the bloody fields of war. Did Richard charge to prove himself the heroic, worthy king? Whatever his reasons, the medieval world, and along with it the ideal of chivalric warfare, was coming to an end. Richard III was the last king of England to be killed in battle. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.